The Mistborn movie has been something that I've been thinking about nonstop ever since it was announced that Apple TV Plus picked up the Cosmere, and I've been watching the weekly updates just waiting to see what all new is happening with Mistborn, and I am just so excited. And I've got a lot of thoughts about what this movie actually needs to be in order to give us something that truly respects the source material. Now, it does help that Brandon Sanderson himself is writing the screenplay. Who would have thought the person that actually wrote the source material in the first place is working on the project and is like heavily involved? Typically when that happens, that's usually a recipe for success. Yeah, there's a lot I want to talk about regarding what I personally want to see from this adaptation, what concerns me, what I'm looking forward to the most. We're also going to talk about like the casting challenges, my personal fan casting for Vin. I'm also going to talk about when we can expect to see this thing actually hit theaters and more. Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit and let's talk about the big picture. Apple TV Plus picking up Mistborn is genuinely one of my favorite moments. When I saw the news first, I saw that they picked up Mistborn, but then I didn't see the fact that they also picked up the rest of the Cosmere, and we were also getting a Stormlight Archive show. I was like, dude, there's no way. Like, this is the best news in the world. Now, if you guys are already an Apple TV connoisseur, you know that they've got some bangers, and their sci-fi catalog has been absolutely insane. You know, you've got Foundation, you've got Silo, you've got For All Mankind, you got Murderbot, Severance, and so on and so forth. There's so many shows on Apple TV Plus that are mainly sci-fi genre, and they've been absolutely crushing that, but the fantasy genre on the platform has been relatively untouched. I think they've done some things that are like fantasy, but for the most part, they haven't had that breakout success. Amazon, you know, has obviously spent a lot of money on Rings of Power, HBO with Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. I've always thought it weird that Apple TV really didn't have like many major sci-fi shows. Like, I was like, what are they doing? Like, this is such a missed opportunity. But then picking up Mistborn and, you know, the rest of the Cosmere is Apple finally saying, we're gonna go compete with fantasy too now. Get ready because it's about to be a bumpy ride. And in my opinion, like, Mistborn is the perfect start to that. And the fact that it's like going to be a movie series is just so insane. Mistborn is a beloved book series, like Era 1, Era 2, The Inevitable Era 3. And if you're somebody that's not like read or listened to the Cosmere yet, like, Mistborn is the perfect start. The world building is unique, the characters are interesting, the magic system is so incredibly in depth. But like, dude, can I be an Allomancer, please? Like, I would love to, you know, burn some metal. Like, can I please do that? And the story is also, you know, dark, it's mature, it's kind of got that YA vibe to it, but it's also like such a unique story to tell that I think Apple could do a good job with. Now, ever since I read the first trilogy of Mistborn, I was always of the opinion that if they did the adaptation, that it would be best to do like with the animation style, like either in the anime style or something like Avatar: The Last Airbender, or as a lot of people point out, like Arcane would be a really solid format for the actual visual style of this series. But that's until we learned that it was going to be a movie, and I was like, okay, well, it's got Apple TV, they've got obviously an infinite money glitch. So if they put the budget that they actually need and, you know, what Mistborn deserves, this could be one of the most visually impressive book to movie adaptations ever. But the only way that happens is if they actually, you know, spend the money on it. I'm also of the opinion that they should try their best to do as many practical effects as possible, but I'll be talking more about the overall visual style and, you know, my expectations for that. But for those of you that have actually, like, you know, missed the, you know, Born update, I guess you can say, get it, Mistborn. But here is the it factor. We're talking about, you know, the make or break part for any book adaptation, and that is the man himself, Brandon Sanderson. Obviously, he's heavily involved in writing the screenplay for the Mistborn movie. Now, for everyone watching this video, obviously you're probably watching this because you follow Brandon's work, or, you know, you saw the news about Mistborn and you're like, what is this movie all about? Well, for one thing, the news happened a long time ago, so hi, welcome. I guess you saw an article randomly or a tweet. But Brandon is an absolute madman. Like, this dude is one of the most prolific writers. I don't know how he does it. Like, this dude writes more than I freaking read 10 times over. I genuinely don't know how he does it, but he has spent decades building out the Cosmere universe, with Mistborn being one of the most important pillars. So the idea that someone other than Brandon could even possibly do the adaptation right is, you know, concerning. But the fact that Brandon himself is in the writer's chair, he's the one doing the screenplay, he's gonna be there on set, he's been in Hollywood way more times than anyone should, so him as heavily involved in this is obviously one of the most reassuring pieces of news that anyone could ask for. Yeah, HBO, we're talking about you. Like, this is obviously a subtweet. Like, we're literally talking about you. What are you doing, dude? George is right there. Granted, should he be writing his book? Yeah, probably. But you know what? I'm fine with more Game of Thrones. I'm fine with more House of the Dragon. Just keep feeding feeding me and I'll watch the stuff. Yeah, Brandon is heavily involved with the project. Again, that's good news. Now, the latest update that Brandon, just revealed not too long ago was that the screenplay for Mistborn is at 72% done. You guys can do the bang in your head. I know you're hearing it. I'm hearing it as well. But he's actively working on Act 1 of the screenplay. He's been knee deep in the project for a while now, and he's preparing to make his first submission to Apple in the next 2 weeks, he said. He also said that submission will include the treatment and potentially some actual pages, which will be the first time that Apple gets to see his work on the adaptation. He hasn't done a screenplay in a while from what he said, but you know what? Instead of just another percentage point going up, or rather 10 percentage points going up, that is some real progress. That is an actual update, and when we could expect Apple to at least, read the first treatment. And I'm sure in only Brandon fashion, by the time they finish up reading the first treatment, he'll be like, hey guys, what about the second and third one that I just finished while you were reading the first one? Okay, so now let's shift focus and talk about the actual movie itself. But the first part of that, let's talk about the casting, because I've got a lot of thoughts. The casting in this adaptation are going to be very important. Dude, Mistborn has some of the most iconic characters, and they have to get it right. Dude, Vin, Kelsier, the Giga Chad Elend, Sazed, the Lord Ruler. Every single one of these characters really needs an actor who can fully embody and just embrace the role. They have to understand the characters. But obviously, I think the most important casting decision is going to be Vin. For quite a long time now, honestly, for years, the community has been debating the perfect casting choice for Vin. Now, the one name that I've seen thrown around quite often is Dafne Keen, which she has acting range. She's a great actress. She's, relatively known. And for somebody that is relatively known, she is, in my opinion, a top tier candidate to play Vin. But this is where we get a little bit, I guess we can say obsessed. Because the more that I look at the options, the more that I'm thinking about Indy Navarrete from Obsession as a potential Vin. I mean, if you haven't seen her before, she's 5 foot tall, which is essentially around the height as Vin. I think Vin was under 5 foot, which you guys can correct me in the comment section. She has a similar build. She's got the acting range. And after seeing her recent work in Obsession, I am convinced that she could do a really good Vin. Dude, she's got range. Now, here's the thing about Indy Navarrete. She's been relatively unknown, even though, for those of you that are ball knowers and watch Superman and Lois, then obviously you know Indy Navarrete. But here lately, Obsession is what really catapulted her name into the mainstream. But it's not absolutely massive levels of fame yet. They are doing really well at the box office. I think they're about to hit 100 million, only on a $750,000 budget, which is crazy. But for the most part, outside of Obsession, she's been relatively unknown as a mainstream actress. Now, whenever it comes to book adaptations, I generally prefer unknown actors. I would much rather have the role define the actor rather than the actor define the role. Whenever you cast anyone that's a Hollywood name behind a character, that immediately becomes the actor's character rather than the character being the one that's the most important part. Look at The Rock with Black Adam. Look at, Henry Cavill trying to be Kaladin. It's kind of funny. Obviously, Brandon's no, he's more Asian. Sorry, dude, it's not for you. But still, that's generally what I like. Usually an unknown actor, someone without the baggage. There's no star power overshadowing the role. So I definitely think they should keep that in mind whenever they decide to cast for Mistborn. That said, what I think matters the most is the performance. If Dafne Keen or somebody Indy Navarrete decides to, accept the role as Vin, well then regardless, I want somebody, whoever it is, they need to nail the role. The next up, the other thing about this movie that really has to be nailed down to a T is the visual style. Like I spoke about earlier, Mistborn has a really unique visual world. The constant ash falling from the sky, the, mist that takes over at night, the grim atmosphere of Luthadel, almost Dark Souls-like. Real quick side note, Brandon, if you're listening to this video, could you happen to have Miyazaki from Software please do an adaptation for Mistborn? That would be really cool. Thank you. Yeah, again, the visual identity is really what makes or breaks a lot of the latest, fantasy adaptations. They try to make everything feel really clean, and they kind of lose some of the visual style and aesthetic. Rings of Power is what comes to mind. I don't know how they do it, but everything just feels so perfect, and it doesn't have, I guess, the word scuff. There's not enough scuff in it. but that scuff was really the visual style that made Peter Jackson, like what he did, so successful, because it looked really natural. Something about Rings of Power, like everything looking so real and like clean, it just looks so fake. So Apple TV needs to, you know, take out their coin purse and decide to spend some money on this, because it really does deserve absolutely insane visuals, like straight up. Next up, let's talk about another creative challenge that they will have to face that Brandon has talked about many times, and that is the Allomancy challenge. Whenever it comes to Allomancy, like in a visual setting, like that is going to be really difficult. Like Brandon is going to have to find a way to make Allomancy visually distinct and, you know, kind of easy to follow without bogging the audience down too much in, you know, exposition. Now, I think if they're doing anime or something like that, then, you know, having voices inside your head or like, you know, hearing the thought process like play out, it would be a bit easier to accomplish. But, you know, the way that they're going to do it, you know, possibly visually represent whenever a metal is being burned, it's going to be a bit tough. Like, I don't know how they're going to pull it off, but I really look forward to seeing what Brandon decides to do in the screenplay. Now, he has answered this in the past, but I think that was like years ago. I don't know if it was for this iteration of the Mistborn screenplay, but he was going to use colors essentially to represent whenever Allomancy is being used as like, you know, a signifier, he said. But again, this is a big challenge and I look forward to seeing how he like fully accomplishes it. He's in the big leagues now. Like, we're talking Apple TV, we're talking big screen. It's going to be a movie and he has to get things right for the first movie. Like, that's just the reality. If he doesn't, you know, set the standard in the first movie, then it's going to be difficult to do for the rest. But now I'd like to talk about when we could realistically see this movie on the big screen. Now, this is a lot of speculation, but the way that Apple has been moving lately, I do feel like this is a priority for them. Brandon being 72% done and he's about to submit to Apple within the next 2 weeks. There's likely going to be multiple rounds of revisions before the final screenplay is locked in. So there's still going to be quite a while, but then you've got the pre-production phase where the casting, location, production design, costume design, all the concept art and all the fun stuff is going to take months to, you know, complete. But then it's going to come down to the actual filmmaking, which for a movie of this scope is going to take probably like 8 to 9 months. It might even take longer, but then the post-production is also going to be a, you know, ton of visual effects. Apple is seemingly going to want this to be a big blockbuster, so they're going to want to nail down pretty much everything. If they do things right, this could be their, you know, moneymaker for the next like 10 years. So yeah, whenever you stack all that up, I'm guessing, and this is once again a guess, but I'm saying like late 2028 at the absolute earliest. Well, realistically, I'm looking at more of like a 2029 release. But again, it all depends on how fast Apple wants to move with this project, but they have to set the standard with it. Like, if they don't start the Cosmere off with a bang, like we're talking like major success, then who knows what the future of the Cosmere looks like on the big screen or in television. They really have to do things justice with Mistborn. If they don't, then I kind of fear for the rest of it, but you know, only time will tell. But that's gonna wrap it up with this video. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe with your notice on. This is Wes Archives. This is where I talk about, you know, fantasy, sci-fi books, book to movie adaptations, you know, all the fun stuff. So yeah, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and I will keep you guys up to date with Mistborn as well as the Stormlight Archive. Thanks for watching, and until next time, this has been Wes, and I want you guys to get reading because I need to as well.